terrestrial supply to supply a 92 million and growing population. Now, we get into trouble when, of course, the extreme influence of our moral guardians come into play. And there's a classic conflict between church and state here, with the result being that nothing happens because of the fact that a law was filed and all focus is on the law rather than the problem. So let us assume and let us agree, I accept that government is not the proper moral guardian of so deeply personal a question as to whether or not to have children, as to whether or not a family must be of this size, that size, or what method to use actually to control your family, to use contraception or whatnot. That is a moral choice to be made. Having said that government is not the right moral guardian, the debate should not stop there though. We cannot just say we won. Government should not intervene and forget about it. Since our moral guardian state, it is a personal choice. They must be responsible now and accountable. The responsibility for a growing population cannot be left in a vacuum. And it must be clear that since government is not the moral guardian, moral guardians must be responsible and accountable. And if the growth rate continues unacceptably, despite the fact that accountability must be with our moral guardians, not merely to teach us, but for results, because there's a finite limit to how much the Philippines can support or how many people the Philippines can support. Then the government must step in at some point if the experiment does not succeed. Now, having said that too, the government's role must be to support any moral choice made by a couple freely made. Because morality in this country differs too. And I have experienced that firsthand in Mindanao with the different ethnic compositions of people there, different religions and the like. So that's the proper position perhaps of government, that it must actively support a choice, must not influence the choice, but it must support a choice. That's the only way, probably, that we would be able to deal with the problem. If not, we will be entangled in a debate which nobody wins.
Okay, the next question.
Okay, the next question is a question from a... The next question is not my question, it's a question from a friend. So the question is, the Presidential Air Wing has 3 Bell 412s.
Yes, it does.
The helicopters used by the presidential staff.
Right.
The repair of this have been bidded out and won by AEC, and is estimated to cost the government about $1 million US. So why have you or the DND given a contract to Hawker Pacific?
The Presidential Airlift Wing helicopters are not under the DND. They are under the Office of the President.
Okay.
These are not assets of the Philippine Air Force. They are flown by Philippine Air Force pilots, but the 3 helicopter 412s are not property of the Philippine Air Force. So the question is best addressed to the Office of the President. The only asset of the Presidential Air Wing, which is Air Force property, is the Fokker 28 jet.
There is a question though. Is it okay if you answer this?
If it's not within my competence, then I cannot answer.
I think it's a personal question.
Okay.
Is it true that you have a first cousin in Hawker?
Yes, it's true. Mr. Tito Lagdamen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, it's true.
Can we have Dean for the next question? And then after that, Teodoro.
I have 2 questions also. One is about the budget is deficit.
Yes.
And when you're in office, what specific measures will you do to address that?
you cannot help having a deficit, especially now, when when all other world economies, the OECD, recommend that governments continue fiscal stimulus and pump priming of the economies. You can only hope that your pump priming is done in the right way as to spur investments which will block out the deficit and try to balance the budget at a future time. But right now, additional financing to plug the deficit and additional or probably even bigger deficit than this year's 290 billion is in the offing. I don't think anybody can deny that. Because a lot of services, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of social amelioration programs, and a lot of pump priming activities are essential. So my personal target is to try to balance the budget at 2014, year 2014. And hopefully through a combination of measures, but the most important thing is confidence in the country, stability of the country on a national security level. Because I mean, any activity which occurs in Basilan, which is not in a violent activity, is equated to Manila. There's no difference to a foreigner's mind. No? So, thirdly, we focus with peace and order in the offing. We focus on a massive blast for tourism. Right now, our problem with tourism is twofold. Number one, people don't know about us that much. But number two, assuming that they did, we don't have any place to put them. We only have the capacity for 3 million tourists a year. Now, with the passage of the new Tourism Act, hopefully, in an ecologically sustainable manner, we will have the capacity to admit more tourists, particularly, and what's increasingly encouraging is that Gibo has the capacity now to accept international flights. There are more and more tourists from Europe coming in. There's a greater mix of tourists. Now, having said that, we should address the gap twofold. Number one, not merely the physical infrastructure gap, but the person gap. We have to have more competence, not merely in English, but in other languages, because we do not expect our tourists to speak our language or to try to communicate with us. We should cater, because we're offering a service to them. So we have to have an active program, hopefully in line with basic education reform roadmap, of offering foreign languages in the high school level, even at the public school level. Recently, Secretary Lapus, I believe, before I left the cabinet, signed an MOA with Ambassador Luis Arias of Spain. Spain will once again finance some public schools to teach Spanish. Why? Because there is increasing global demand for both skilled and high-level executives who are Spanish-speaking. And we lost that competitive advantage that we once had. Even assuming our 21 units of Spanish in college would not allow us to speak conversational Spanish, it would be easy to brush it up. Once you get through the conjugations of verbs and all that, which everybody hated. So, I think that's the second thing. Thirdly, we must have some form of political stability for everything to work. And that's a function already of leadership, how you reach out to the disparate segments of the political spectrum. No? And naturally, too, you will have to have local government supervision, so that local governments, which are the first link sometimes with a lot of people, have best practices ingrained in them. Those are some of the things, but with the deficit, it's a reality we must live with. And it's just have to commit ourselves nationally